Hey everyone, so if you've paid attention to the Korean ladder lately, you would have seen that Showmaker actually held rank 1 and rank 2 on the ladder at one point. So really insane achievement, and I wanted to kind of like take a look at how he did it and explain it to you guys. So first off, one thing I noticed, Ahri has top played and top win rate on both accounts, and his win rate on the champ is just insane. He's been winning pretty much every single game, and when I looked up some videos on this, the kind of explanations I saw for like his Ahri gameplay was very shallow, didn't really go in depth, so I'm going to do my best to kind of explain it to you guys so that you guys can have like a really good Ahri win rate as well. So quickly, the runes, he does pretty much the same thing every game. He takes a electrocute primary tree going with this. The only thing you can really change up is you can change armor for MR, and also depending on your matchup you can change cosmic to time warp tonic, like if you need skill shots, if you need movement speed to dodge skill shots. Otherwise just go with cosmic insight and that'll do you well. For the item build, you can build basically the same items every game. Honestly, I think like pretty much lucidity boots 100% of the time. You can go Sork Shoes if you're the only AP on your team. After that, you want to go like Everfrost, and then you can kind of choose your items after that a bit situationally. Good second items, stuff like Cosmic Drive, Shadow Flame, Zhonya's, all good items. And then after that, you kind of want to round out your build with stuff like Rabadons, Void stuff like that. You also see Magi's quite a lot. That's because Ahri is very hard to die on, so you can get Magi's a lot. Lich Bane's another option that you might see. It's actually pretty decent now, so let's get into the gameplay. Starting off, we have an Ahri versus Zoe matchup. The way you kind of want to play Ahri in the early game, you don't want to trade too much. You mainly kind of want to trade defensively and look to hit that level 6 mark. Pre-6 Ahri is quite weak, but post-6 you have enough mobility and enough wave clear that you can either neutralize lanes or at least go even at that point. So I think in the early game, you're mainly looking to kind of like use your abilities defensively. You don't really want to be using your abilities on cooldown. So there are champions like Syndra or Orianna, for example, that might want to spam their cooldowns and look to harass the opponent, but that's never really going to be the case for Ahri. The best thing you can kind of do in the early game is you can do a little bit of trading with W. If you can fish for a charm, like that can be good as well. But I think mainly just like keeping your farm up. If you can get the wave in a somewhat gankable position, like I think in the middle or on your side is normally better. If you can get a little bit of push in the early game, it is nice because then you can go and drop a ward. But I think for the most part, just like see the way he's kind of like playing it out here, using, using spells sort of defensively, and not really giving Zoe the opportunity to trade aggressively on him. One thing you can do is if you get an auto attack like that on your opponent, your W will lock on. So that allows you to kind of get electrocute proc for relatively low investment. That way you can kind of trade pretty efficiently. Even in matchups that are considered more difficult, you can oftentimes just like go even on Ahri by just like holding your charm and also abusing your sustain. So there's not that many champs that can just like harass you on cooldown without needing to be careful of like your charm and stuff as well. There's a lot of gank threat that you have, as well as just like your end build sustain, as well as your wave clear that you get later in the lane, means that pretty much every matchup is at least neutralizable as Ahri, and there's a lot of matchups that are actually winnable. So you can see you can go for little trades like this. Zoe wasted her cooldowns and Ahri got a really good punish. I think it's really important that you guys look for that. Definitely in my coaching sessions, I don't see enough cooldown punishment, and it's a super big part of mid lane. Perhaps even the biggest part. I'd say like wave control and cooldown punishment are two like absolutely massive factors of the laning phase, and something you guys need to think about a lot. So Zoe got chunked out a lot, so able to push us in. Zoe's going to greed the recall, try and stay in lane, which means Showmaker will cancel his base. Can maybe look for some harass here. Good ward over the wall. Viego's bot side, so going to run from that. His stun actually timed out. So Zoe's most likely going to base here, given that it's a cannon wave. You can see the demats that he's taken can allow him to reset here. There's two ways to use demats really. Three ways I guess. You can use demats just all on, say, the range creeps to make your wave clear a bit easier. Alternatively, you can use it on cannon waves to either roam or help you base. Or you can also use them on one each if you just want to kind of increase your like wave, I guess like your wave clear overall. So I believe this game he did use one on each, but I think it was mainly so he could help himself reset there. Gets the base, picks up the Amp Tome and the Dark Seal. This is something I highly recommend. For some reason, I don't see many people pick up Dark Seal on AP champs, but you should almost always be buying this on the first base. The reason is, especially on a champ like Ahri, where it's more difficult to die, you can stack this up like really, really high. And it gives you like just so many free stats. Another thing is that you can afford to be a bit greedier in matchups like this about buying boots on your first base. So Normally, like, if your opponent has skill shots, it's pretty important to buy boots early. Zoe, while she has skill shots, it's not like, they're not, you don't dodge them as the same way you do like an Orianna Q or a Syndra Q. You know, dodging Zoe's ability is mainly about like positioning in the lane as opposed to like reacting, you know, whereas dodging stuff like Syndra Q or Ori Q, it's very much about like how much move speed you have and like how good your mechanics are. But in a matchup like this, you can kind of greed, not go for the boost. You can actually get the Dark Steel and the Amp Tome, which gives you a lot of wave clear. And also, like, Ahri being, like, very mobile means that you can greed not having boots. Again, like, once you hit level 6, even if you don't have the movement speed, oftentimes you can get away from ganks just kind of by dashing away. So that's really important because if you can greed for that little extra AP, it does allow you to push waves a level earlier, or at least, like, you know, one-shot the back line with either a Q or a Q and an auto. So those kind of breakpoints are pretty important to hit, especially if you really want to hard pressure the map. So Zoe, she's very gankable. Like, that's one thing you can definitely look for. If you can kind of like place your pink, it would be good. You know, he hasn't placed his pink yet because he hasn't really gotten an opportunity to have control of the wave. But if you can place your pinks in good spots and look to pressure the enemy mid that way, it can be a really good way to bring some pressure, because Ahri, for the most part, doesn't bring a huge amount of pressure in the 1v1. Like, there are matchups that you can definitely win and get solo kills in, especially once you start getting fed. But your first kills will almost always have to come from either ganks or from roaming to other lanes. But once you get that snowball going, then you can kind of like take things into your own hands. So push mid here, likely going to look to make a play. Could pink ward and aggressively in the top jungle here, actually. Or maybe just hitting this. Riven's on very low health, so I think that's why she's roaming up here. Yeah, Riven is like extremely low, has to leave the tower. Looks like it's going to be picked up. Yeah, that guy's super dead, I think. Yep. Okay, so it was really good read by her. Saw that the top wave was pushed in. Riven was on very low HP, and it's very easy to just come up and pick a kill here. Pretty much for free. You know, there's not too much investment. The only kind of loss here is that she is going to lose some creeps mid, but it's like, there's some champs that can't really afford to give up CS, obviously. You know, if you're playing a control mage where your chances of getting successful roams off are much lower, and you're kind of, it's much more important that you do stay on that 10 CSPM. You'd honestly probably still go for that roam, but you'd be less happy about giving up the creep wave for it. Ahri, though, not really a champion that does require 10 CSPM. Yeah. Obviously, you don't want to just like give up waves for free, but if you can get something for pushing a wave and roaming, like, that's absolutely fine as well. Zoe makes a play bot, so Ahri looks to punish, just going to push mid. This is one thing that I see people mess up a lot as well. After your opponent roams to another lane, unless you can do something about it, you just always want to push. You know, some people here would have just ran bot and tried to like salvage the roam. But normally you can actually punish a lot if people roam off tempo. You know, you can crash a couple waves, you can sometimes get a couple plates, and you oftentimes actually end up ahead of it, especially if your opponent isn't the one that gets the kill. So that's really, really important. If you can't get to the play in time, just look to trade, especially if, you know, the roam is already happening, or like the play is already underway and you haven't even left your lane. I think in that sort of situation, it's much, much better if you can just trade instead. And trading can be like a few different things. It can be like pushing mid and hitting the tower. It can be like pushing mid and roaming top, you know, making another dive play happen. It could even be like supporting your jungle for invading, right? So there's a lot of ways to trade. And you just kind of got to evaluate like which is the most valuable at the moment. So hits a charm, really nice charm actually. Zoe has flash, so not going to go down. Oh, actually just got one shot by Graves. Did have flash though. That was an insane amount of damage coming out of Graves there. So very, very nice. You can see that if you just look for those like little charms, especially by this point in the lane, it actually does a meaningful amount of damage. And also another thing is that now when you've got that, like, you've got those points in queue and you're able to kill the wave in reasonable time, it gives you a lot of priority to do stuff. So another thing I'll bring up here is the boots rush. So this is kind of up to you. If you want to roam a lot, having the boots upgrade early is quite useful. Again, if you reverse a skill shot heavy matchup, rushing boots is almost always correct. So you can go this thing if you want, you know, the boots to rush. Alternatively, if you go Lost Chapter, it allows you to kind of like spam shove in waves, accelerate your own farming and stuff like that. I personally prefer Lost Chapter, but it is definitely like matchup and game dependent, and there isn't really like one that's clearly better than the other. Another thing is you'll see that he swapped to sweeper. So there aren't that many mid champs that can do this early because typically you're still gankable by this point. But Ahri is so difficult as a champ to gank. You know, she's got extra W move speed, she's got her ult charges, and she also has charm for self peel. So that's like a lot of extra stuff that you have tools in order to escape ganks. And because of that, you can actually greed for sweeper and you can look to control mid with that. You know, a lot of the champs that you will verse actually kind of struggle with being ganked. You know, there's a lot of counters to Ahri, stuff like Victor, you know, stuff like Orianna, that while they're a counter in the 1v1, they're very gankable. So if you control mid, it makes it very difficult for them to play. And also it makes it, you know, kind of, if they make a mistake, you can easily punish them with your jungler. I'm just going to back this up really quick to kind of see how this play happened. So Zoe actually had flash, but you can see the amount of damage coming out by Ahri at this point, especially with the Nami behind her, is actually pretty decent. And so that's kind of what I mean. If once you do get to this point, like you can start looking for solo kills and stuff like that, but it's very important that I think your first kind of play at level 6 with ult and ignite is generally not a solo play. You know, it's something that you make with your jungler, and that's really important. You know, Ahri, while she isn't quite to the same level of something like you know, Galio or Lissandra, where they're like pretty much purely support champs, she's still somewhat reliant, especially on that first ultimate. Like that's really important. Similar to a champion like Nocturne, your first ultimate can dictate a lot of the game. And while Ahri's ultimate isn't the longest cooldown, that level 6 like ult ignite power spike, if you can secure a kill with this, it kind of really puts the game in your favor. And on the other hand, if you don't secure a kill at this point and you waste them, you're kind of going to be weak for a pretty long time. You know, you're going to, without ult ignite pressure, you are going to be weak for around 3 minutes. So it's really important that you play around that like key timing of being very, very strong. Now, Ahri's probably biggest spike in the game is at this point here. So the one item with boost, really, really strong at this point and able to create just a lot of plays. You know, you've got enough CDR now where you can just like make plays over and over. You have enough wave clear so that when you push a wave, your turns to do stuff, like, you know, you've got a lot of time. As you can see here, like the wave already pushed in so early, has a lot of time to do whatever she wants really. Here, looking to just go for the turret plates, it looks like. Maybe could take a look at these raptors, but doing camps on Ahri does kind of take forever, so it's not something you can do like that often, but sometimes you do get an opportunity for it. Zoe really wants this cleanse, so maybe Ahri will look to punish her for it. Got Nami around her pretty much always. If you do hit a charm here and then can follow up with Everfrost, it's almost guaranteed to be a kill. So you can definitely look for that kind of as a combo. I think Zoe is definitely playing with fire a little bit. You know, one charm and she's dead pretty much. Gonna look to take these raptors. Taking the little ones is probably a good idea. I'm not sure it can invest the time to take the big one. Kind of just takes too long. Oh, I actually kind of gave up on the raptors. I think got like 2 of them. So good hustle overall. Starts with the Everfrost to try hitting the charm a bit easier. So that's another thing you can do for yourself. That guy's actually okay. He actually is dead. I thought he was gonna get out. Didn't play it optimally, I don't think. Obviously missed the charm, but the main point is that if you can, you know, once you get Everfrost, it makes charm much more of a not a guarantee, but it just becomes higher percentage, right? And I think also a lot of the time, the slow, even if you don't hit the charm, can allow you to kind of like stay within range to hit your W's and R's. And if you can hit both sides of Q, obviously it's quite a bit of extra damage because of that second half being true damage. So Zoe dead. Just gonna push this tower and take it. If you can ever take mid tower, it's like really, really valuable. You have to kind of be careful because you don't want to stay on the map too long just hitting a tower that isn't gonna die, because if the tower doesn't die and you don't get plates from it, it is kind of a poor use of tempo when you could be pressuring something else. But if you can just get a bunch of free hits on the tower and you don't really lose anything, you know, you don't lose the ability to kind of pressure the map, you don't overstay too long, then the mid tower getting low, especially when you're against like a wave clear mid, it's very, very useful, because otherwise that mid tower won't go down for a long time. And a lot of these champions are very reliant on their mid tower being up. You know, champs like Zoe, Lux, Xerath, all this type of stuff. When the tower is up, they're pretty much completely safe. They can wave clear forever and still out of the game a lot. But once this tower falls and it's kind of forced into a side wave situation, these champs sort of suffer. And a champion like Ahri is actually very good on the side wave. You know, pushes reasonably fast, pretty much ungankable. And at this point in the game, it actually does have reasonable 1v1s. So if you can open up the map earlier, it's really, really good, especially if you have a jungler that can get Herald and help you open up even faster. It puts you in such a good spot. So you see the Medjai's buy. I think Medjai's should be bought, not literally every game, but like you should buy Medjai's very, very often on Ahri. Again, it's just hard to die on the champ. You have so many tools. You've got all those defensive tools with your W and R, and also your charm, which can be used defensively or offensively. The extra HP from Everfrost. Basically, like the only way to die on Ahri is by making a big mistake, especially if you're ahead, you know? Like Ahri from behind sometimes can feel kind of useless, but you know, when you're ahead, it's very hard to die, and a good way to kind of extend that lead even further is just buying that Medjai's and ensuring you're going to scale really well. So it comes to push top. Dragon's in 50 seconds, so if you can push this before Dragon, it's really, really good. That means that this wave is going to be crashing top when Dragon's getting fought over, so the red team is going to have to choose here whether they answer this top wave. As you can see, it's in a very pressuring spot at the moment, or contesting this drag. So you can see that Zoe shows top, obviously wants to farm, and that's going to make it very difficult for Zoe to get to this dragon in reasonable time, and likely going to be a free drag. It kind of depends what they do here, actually, because they might choose to just look to extend their lead topside instead. Looks like that is what they're going to do. So Zoe's probably moving down the map right now, but maybe... Okay, actually Zoe is going top, so they're kind of going to be ignoring playing for the drag right now, which I actually sort of like. You know, Dragon at this point in the game is honestly not very useful, because like if you look, it's already 16 minutes and only one drag has been picked up, so most likely the game is not going to 4 dragons anyway. And if that's the case, you can oftentimes just like trade a lot more, right? Like Zoe probably felt like she was going to be safe there, assuming the blue team would be on drag. But you don't really need drag here. Like if red team gets the drag, it's sort of whatever, right? Like you can see Viego picks it up, it's their second drag. It's still not threatening the 4th drag anytime soon. And for it, they traded kill on Zoe, stop her from farming, as well as get the Rift Herald. So it snowballs the game very fast. And I think that's very important as well. Like, just like think about that a lot in solo queue, because it's very common in solo queue that your team just like fights everything. But if they're not going to fight it, or you know, you've decided as a team not to fight it, basically, there's a lot you can trade for it. You know, if your enemy team kind of commits numbers to Dragon, oftentimes that can be like a tower, it can be camps, Rift Herald, you know, a dive, all on the other side of the map, and that can translate to actually a lot more effective gold. So one-shots Viego on the side. Viego's a very important target, you know, especially if you can stop him early, getting the resets. Playing on his range really nicely here. Another thing that I don't see many lower elo Ahri players do is actually play on their range. So I see so many Ahri players just like dash into melee range. This doesn't need to be the case. Puts out a huge amount of damage, really uses like the Ahri kit kind of to its full potential here. You can literally just like, you know, you kind of, the way you kind of want to use Ahri's ult is you sort of want to time it with other abilities, you know, like you can time it around charms, you can time it around when you have like your W and your Q up, and you don't really want to just like be ulting purely for the damage, you want to be combining it with something else. And that gives you like a huge amount of mobility in the team fight, and it also makes it really hard to react to a lot of your spells, you know, because there's a very big difference to just like an Ahri walking around charming and queuing people, and like respecting that compared to respecting kind of the dash, or maybe even 2 dashes into spell, into cooldown that can come out of Ahri. So that's really important as well, that you do kind of chain those together, because it makes it a lot more difficult for the enemy team to kind of play against. The second item, Blitzbane here, I honestly feel like at this point in the game, when you're this fed, you could buy basically whatever item you wanted and just win. So I'm not going to read too much into the item purchase. I do think what's it called? I do think Blitzbane is a decent second item. There are actually a lot of good second items on Ahri. One thing I will say is, I think there is a tendency in general to overbuy defensive items on Ahri. Even for very good players, it's very common that I see stuff like Zhonya's, Banshees literally every game. And while these are good items on Ahri, don't get me wrong, it's really important that you are buying them because the damage is like unavoidable, or because it's actually going to make like a really big difference. Because Ahri as a champ has like so much safety and so much mobility that you can afford to itemize extremely aggressively, and then, you know, kind of use your kit to keep yourself safe, and then like just buy really greedy items like full damage sort of stuff. So I want to bring that up because I see, again, a lot of the time in my coaching sessions, stuff like Zhonya's, Banshee's kind of bought, not for no reason, but just not really necessary. You know, you really need to evaluate, do I actually need this item, or is it just like a crux? Because I think, is it just a crutch? Sorry. I think that's really important. You know, these items do significantly less damage. So for you to be buying it, it has to actually be the difference between you kind of like outputting, you know, damage, or maybe being forced out of the fight and kind of being able to play the fight. And that's something you do have to evaluate just game to game. But I think in general, a good way to look at it is just like, is this damage like avoidable or outplayable, or like just like you know, it doesn't have to be, is it literally like dodgeable? It can be, is it reasonable to dodge this ability? So an example might be, for example, like LeBlanc damage. It's very hard to realistically dodge LeBlanc damage. A lot of LeBlanc damage will come from Fog of War. It will come from like QR poke, stuff like that. So in that sort of game, you know, you could see a defensive item being somewhat justified. If you talk about a champion like, say, Yone or Yasuo for Ahri, Zhonya's would not really be required. They're melee champions. You can kite them somewhat easy, and you don't really need to worry too much about damage from them. So that would be a kind of situation where I don't think it would really be necessary. Now here, Ahri doesn't do much damage to Baron. Looks like the enemy team FF, but I just want to quickly show this to you. When you guys are doing Baron, this is another thing you should think about. It's really important that you're pressuring over the wall as Ahri, because you do very little damage to Baron, so you're kind of better suited to slowing the enemy down from coming in, looking for poke, kind of like as they face check, or, you know, making a pick or something like that is often better than just DPSing the Baron. So that's going to be it for this video, guys. Hopefully I told you a lot of information about Ahri. The champ doesn't seem to be getting nerfed anytime soon, and it's super OP, definitely an S tier mid at the moment. And I really wanted to make this video. Initially, I wasn't going to make this video, actually, because like other people had already done it, right? But it felt like all the analysis on Ahri was very surface level, and I think a lot of the stuff I talked about wasn't talked about in other videos, so hopefully it was helpful for you guys. Sorry, I am still a little bit sick, but now the video should be kind of starting to get back to normal. So yeah, if you liked it, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.